I'm Associate Professor Linda Graham, and I'm the editor of the Australian Educational Researcher. Well, the Australian Educational Researcher is the official journal of the Australian Association for Research and Education, and I think it's Australia's premier education research journal. It's a general education journal. It publishes a wide range of research articles in the area of education, all the way from early childhood through to further education. That being said, it publishes articles that are likely to be of interest to a broad audience. The journal has been through a bit of a renaissance lately. It's now published by Springer Publishing, which is an international publisher, and it has an impact factor of 0.438 currently. It's in the Scamargo quartile 2 in the rankings, and the quality of publications in the journal are continually increasing, and that has been my focus since I took over in December 2013, in terms of trying to develop the papers that have been submitted, and also trying to ensure that that the journal review process is quick and rigorous. We get about 180 to 200 submissions per year, and we publish 5 issues a year. So given that each issue has about 7 papers in it, and we would publish probably 35 in a year, that means that we have a rejection rate of about 85%. And that is also because of those 5 issues, we have 1 special issue each year. And there is a separate process involved in making a proposal. There are kind of 4 issues left for general submissions, roughly about 28 articles per year, therefore. And what that means is that the focus is very much on quality and on original contribution to knowledge. When a paper is submitted to AARE, there is a process that we go through, and the beginning of that process is that the paper comes to me, and I examine the manuscript and see whether it has got, I guess, some core indicators of quality. If the paper has merit, then it'll go out for review. Then the review process generally takes between 2 and 3 months for those reviewers to come back. It is rare for a paper to be accepted at that point, and they go out for a second, for revision, and quite often a second review. We go through that process of trying to determine which papers will, have significant merit, and regardless, we try to make sure that the reviewing process is constructive, so that even if the paper is not published in AARE, that the author has a fairly significant amount of feedback, so that there's a pedagogical responsibility in all of this, that the author has something constructive that they can take away and improve that article, and perhaps submit it to a more appropriate journal. Okay, well, one of the first things that I look at when we receive a manuscript is the literature review. And I look to see how comprehensive that literature review is. I look to see how current the sources that are drawn on are. The other thing I look at very quickly is to see whether the article is, how they're treating that literature, whether they are building on that literature, or whether it is just a a rehearsal of arguments, so whether they synthesize and analyze and arrive at a point through which they, the author uses that to say, well, here is the research gap. The next thing that I look at is the research design and methods. So in terms of clarity is a big thing, and I look to see whether people are just perfunctory in the way that they describe their approach. Simple things like the number of participants and what kind of participants they have. Readability is one of the, and meaning is one of the kind of most important things in academic writing. And I think sometimes we miss that. So I look to see whether that is clear and whether other things like, is the participant sample sufficient for the research questions? Is the design appropriate for what the author is setting out to do? It's about, the research design and approach being fit to purpose. I also look at analytical methods and how clearly they have been described, and that's important. Transparency is important so that the reader is able to understand and can trust what the author has done, what the research is, and the findings that are being made. You can't judge the authenticity of that and the reliability of it, the trustworthiness of it, if people are going to be sketchy about what they did and how they came to the conclusions that they did. The key issue is the quality of the findings, the originality of the findings, the level of deep thought that has been, that has gone into. Are they just reporting, results, or are they thinking deeply about what those results might mean? Is there something that can be learned from those findings? So those are the kind of big things that I'm looking for. Also about context, how well situated the study is, how well described the context is, in terms of where the research took place, and whatever is unique about that. And that is one of the key kind of things, I think, as well, that authors need to be aware of, which is internationalisation. So it doesn't only need to be about Australian educational research, but it does need to bear some relevance to this context. So one common mistake I think that international authors make is that they don't consider how, what they're writing about bears, any relation to the readers or the majority of the readers who will be reading it. So that it needs to be situated, in an international context. One of the best ways in which to do that is, and also of working out whether AARE is the most appropriate journal for your work, is to have a look at what has been published in the journal before. And I'm somewhat amazed at how few people seem to do that. There is some really top quality research that it has been published in the journal, and because it's a general education journal, there's a lot to choose from. So there will generally be something on your topic in the journal that has been published before. And one of the things that we're trying to do is to, encourage conversation within the journal. So it is appropriate for authors to, to consider what has been said on this topic before, to engage with that, to build on that, and, over time, future authors will do the same with your work. So one of the things as an editor that I'm, looking for or looking at when I'm reading through a new manuscript is, how does this research move us on from what we already knew? We use the words original contribution to knowledge a lot of the time, but but it actually takes really hard work to produce that. And there is such pressure to publish these days that that doesn't necessarily always happen. So I'm looking for insights that return to the conceptualization of the problem, you know, that speak to or answer the research questions and which build on or add to the existing body of knowledge, you know, in a meaningful way. And that's going to, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, that it's going to be something that other people want to read, that will inform and benefit other people's work. That's why we publish. That's why we draw on and cite research. In terms of, you know, technical tips and things that I'm looking for, please use double spacing. Another one is fully proofread your manuscript. If a manuscript has been written by speakers, you know, non-native speakers of English, then it's an idea to get them proofread by someone who is a native speaker of English or an editor, for example, before you submit, because it makes it so much more difficult when there are continual errors, whether it's typographical, whether it's grammar, whether it's spelling, or any of those sorts of things. It makes it so much more difficult to read for meaning. And if you want your work to be received positively by reviewers, or even to get out to reviewers in the first place, it's really important that being able to read for meaning is easy to do. If your paper does go out for review and you get reviewers' comments, bear in mind that the reviewers have spent probably, and the more comprehensive ones particularly so, they've spent quite a bit of time. When I review an article, it takes sometimes half a day. So it's, you know, because if you do it properly, it takes quite a bit of time. So when you are resubmitting your paper, you need to write a full response to the reviewers. And that should not be caustic. It shouldn't be, dismissive. If you are going to disregard something that a reviewer said, then you need to justify and defend that. And you definitely need to use track changes in your revised manuscript, or one of them, so that the associate editor who's responsible for your paper, or me, have something to go back and look to see, okay, so they say they did this, where is it? Did they do it? I'm not going to go back through an unmarked manuscript and reread the whole thing again. So if you don't put track changes in and you don't write a full response to reviewers, that may come back to you with a request that you do. So those, I think, are some, you know, tips to make the response or the process easier. We really want those articles to, or the authors, to benefit from the process. I think it's frustrating for authors when all they receive is a litany of what they've done wrong, and with no suggestions about how they might put that right. So in the last 2 years, since I took over as editor, as I mentioned, the journal has been going through a bit of a renaissance, and so has AARE. And so we have a beautiful new cover for the journal, which is, I think, really nice, and goes with the AARE new branding. The journal now has a Twitter handle. And I forget how many followers we have because it keeps changing. I think we've got in the area of, 400, something like that. And for the benefits for authors in this, and actually the benefits for academics if they follow the journal, is that each publication or each issue that we come out with, we tweet, the papers, what papers have come out and all that sort of stuff. And so even if you are a highly specialised researcher in a particular area, there will be papers that come out that are of interest, and you won't know that unless you follow us on Twitter. Although another way that we can alert readers as to what has just been published in the journal is there's the table of contents alert, which you can go on to the journal website and put in your email address, and each time there's a new issue you will receive an alert as to the table of contents for that issue. Another way is that new articles are published or are made publicised on the AARE Facebook page. And one of the things that we're doing, this is a new initiative that I'm really excited about. I've been watching Twitter feeds from teachers and their Twitter chats, and the concern is with the kind of exclusivity of academic publishing, and that's a concern that academics also share. So I've negotiated with Springer that every issue we make one article free to access for 2 months, and that article is tweeted out, and teachers can access that article, and I try to choose ones that I think will be of interest to the teaching profession, to a broad audience. So people can, anyone, the broad public can just access that paper, download it, read it. Very, very interested to hear what people have to say about it. Then that, I think, is a really positive step, and I thank Springer for that. Another thing that we are doing is that anyone who publishes in AARE is also welcome to publish a blog about their paper in the AARE Research, Edu Research Matters blog. We have a professional editor who will work with authors to be able to take the central messages out of their paper and rewrite that or re-articulate that in an 800-word kind of piece for general consumption. So I send invitations particularly to the authors whose paper has been selected for free to access, and ask them to put a blog piece onto the AARE Edu Research Matters blog, and then that is tweeted out via AARE, via me, via a whole bunch of people. So for authors and for readers, there are benefits in both of those, because authors their papers will get so much more exposure than you ordinarily do. And readers, if they're just on Twitter, they can see it coming through, or if they sign up to the AARE Facebook page, they can get the same thing. So it's all about sharing work amongst not only the AARE community, but also more broadly.